Here's our agenda for today. We're going to go, as we typically do, over just some general CSAC information and upcoming trainings. We're going to give you an overview of the DSIG program, and we're going to talk about growing the program. So the good news is we are seeing growth, right? It's been incremental year to year, but it's exciting to see that more and more schools are participating in the program and growing their program. And we are making a push to ensure that that continues to happen. And then we have new. The DSIG application process will now be in WebGrants for students. So we're going to talk about that. That's definitely one thing that people were asking for. We also, the payment process will also be in WebGrants, so we will talk about that in some detail. And then we'll get some additional fellowship and internship information. Okay. If you are not subscribed to CSAC Listserv, which is how you would get informational emails from us, we highly recommend that you do that because, hey, we know you don't get enough emails and we're here to help. So sign up for those emails. You'll get very good updates about things that are happening with programs. You'll get updates about other opportunities for presentations live or online. So you want to make sure that you're getting that information. A lot of it's super timely for those of you who are working with students, and it's good to have. Okay, so we're going to jump in and we're going to start with CSAC training and updates. Whoops, my mouse said, no, you're not. All right. So first of all, we do want to let you know that CSAC has a student success blueprint, and the blueprint is really just a kind of a list of goals and principles that we are working on to ensure that everything that we do is around student equity and student-centered. So we want to ensure that there's equitable access for students, that they're getting the support they need, and that they are successful in their goal to go to college after high school or at any point. If you're interested in seeing information, more specific information about our blueprint and our blueprint goals, you can use that link below and it will take you right there. All right. You may have noticed if you've been on some of our other um, webinars that every month, we are trying to highlight a group or a cohort of students. Um, and it's very diverse, right? So this month, the month of June, we are focused on the LGBTQIA plus students, and we are providing you with a lot of resources to ensure that we're equitable and that those students are able to, again, get the education that they need with no roadblocks. So we have information about resource centers. Um, Virtually every college in California has a LGBTQIA center or hub or resource center. When you're working with those students, if they ask and they get ready to go to college, you definitely want to connect them with those centers. So this is just a lot of information. We had and we will continue to talk about this for the rest of the month. So we kicked off the first of the 20, let's see, when did we do that? I always get these dates confused. But we have Navigating Cal Grants. You may remember this as regional training. So the name has changed, and actually the format has been greatly improved. So now this is very specifically for college financial aid administrators. Um, Sometimes we have high school counselors show up. Great. I mean, if you're interested, you can certainly pop in. But the information we're providing is primarily for college financial aid administrators. And we do this. This is a series that typically we do 3 sessions over a 3-day period, and you can sign up. You don't necessarily have to do all three. In order. Sometimes you can only do two, and then you'd have to wait for the next cycle to come around, and you could finish up the third one. So these are the dates that are available. Use that QR code. And, if you have any questions about that, please feel free to contact us. This is the 7th annual California College Affordability Summit, which will be coming up. This will be virtually, I think, going forward. Most of them will be virtually, and it will be on Tuesday, October 6th. So save the date. And this event brings together a wide variety and a wide range of K through 12 educators. So that would include high school counselors, college financial aid folks, student advocates, people who make policy, yeah, and others. and they get together and they share updates and information about what they're doing and the tools that they're using to ensure success for students. Um, and it's really interesting. It's a full day practically. So you want to sign up for that. You can use that QR code, get more information, and then we will look to see you there. So save that date, put that on the calendar, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Affordability Summit. We have ongoing webinar training throughout the summer. So here's a list of some of the things that we're doing. Um, and if anything is interesting, you can just click that link or with one of those links, corresponding links below, and it will take you to all the available trainings that you can sign up for. I'm going to give a little shout out to the what were previously called the high school counselor workshops and are now called the annual statewide financial aid workshops. The in-person ones will start at the end of August. So if you're signed up for listserv, you'll get an email and you can register if you're a high school counselor or you work with that cohort of students. Um, those will start again at the end of August, and we will be all over the state as always, and we'll have a number of virtual events. All right, I've plugged away. Now I'm done. We are trying to, and in fact, we are updating our training videos and adding new ones all the time. Obviously, you can't count on every single live webinar that we do as much as we would like that. So we suggest do the next best thing, and that's check out the training videos that we have on our website. This is just a sampling. This kind of just gives you an idea. Some of them are very specific to uh, college financial aid administrators. Some of them are very specific to high school staff. Some of them, like today, for example, this particular training is we have both groups here and represented. So go onto our website. There's a link down there below. You can see all the video tutorials that we have. Um, and they're really well done. Most of them are quite short. So take a look at those. All right. Now, here we go. This little voice asking, can we get to the DSIG stuff now? Yes, yes, we can. The little girl says, can we jump into the meat of the, yes, all right, calm down. Here we go. So we're going to start with the DSIG program overview. So, um, DSIG is a program that's been around for a while, and what you need to know about DSIG to start is that this is for students who complete a California Dream Act application or a CADA. So that would be, undocumented students or mixed status students who meet AB 540 requirements. Um, and they could be eligible to participate in the program if they have a Cal Grant B, um, or if they have a Cal Grant A, but they had Cal Grant B eligibility when they were first awarded. So typically we tell students if you have a Cal Grant B or you're eligible for a Cal Grant B, you are eligible to participate in the program. And we have communications. We've had more than one that have gone out about this program. So this is kind of the basic information. So if you want to know more details about it, or you want to know about mixed status students specifically, and who is a mixed status student, we have information about that. We did open up, you may recall, the DREAM Act application to mixed status students, and a mixed status student is a student who could fill out a FAFSA, right? Because they're a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, et cetera. But maybe they have a parent or parents who don't have a social security number, who can't create that FSA ID. So in that case, they're considered mixed status. California leads the way with mixed status students by far. So we wanted to make sure that they had the opportunity, if they chose to, fill out the DREAM Act application. They certainly don't have to, but it's just an option for them or anyone who's what they weren't comfortable necessarily filling out the FAFSA. So if they meet the criteria, they can participate in the program. That's the main takeaway from this. If you want more information, check out that link and you'll get much more detailed information. We continue to reiterate that the information on the DREAM Act application is secure and private. We take that very seriously. This is an ongoing daily thing at CSAC because we realize that we have a lot of valuable information. We want to make sure that that information stays in-house and that even though there are bad actors who are trying to gain access to all kinds of information everywhere, we want to make sure that that application remains safe, that's not shared with the federal government. It doesn't share any information, and we don't share any information about a student's immigration status. Uh, and we follow all the usual laws that protect information, student data specifically. So we have information about that on our website if you want to learn more. But I'm comfortable in telling you that to the best of my knowledge, and I've been here for a minute, we've never had an issue with a student um, who filled out a DREAM Act application. So we consider it safe, and we want to ensure that students are filling it out so they can get money for college and participate in DSIG. All right. So here's some DSIG basics. So what is DSIG? It's the Dream Act Service Incentive Grant. We call it DSIG. And it allows California Dream Act application students who I said, like I said previously, who have a Cal Grant B or they meet Cal Grant B eligibility to participate in the program. What else? How much is the award? So students can earn up to $4,500 per academic year. That's the yearly maximum. And there's a cap on the number of students who can actually be awarded at any given time, and that's 1667, 1,667. So the good news is we continue to increase the number of students who are participating in the program. The not so great news is that we're still not that close to that 67 that we want to be. So we're trying to maximize this award. We want as many students as possible to benefit from DSIG. You know, we know for a fact that sometimes students who fill out the DREAM Act application, they're eligible for state aid and institutional aid and other things. Um, but oftentimes they have a gap between what they're getting and what they actually need. And so this is a great opportunity for them to make up the difference. With a really good program that when students who are participating love the program, schools who are kind of all in on this program love the program, and we just need to make sure that we continue to grow the program. So how many hours is the program? The student needs to complete 300 hours of community service per academic year. So they're not working because it's not a job, but they are doing community service or volunteering, and they can do 300 hours. They need to do 300 hours to get the maximum payment. So, and that's during the course of the academic year. So where can students volunteer? All over the place. So um, let's start with the campus. Anything on campus is going to be, with very few exceptions, is going to be a place where students could volunteer. So most departments on campus, there are students who are helping in the library, in the financial aid department, in the different outreach centers on campus. For example, the Dreamer Resource Center sometimes will have a DSIG student. There's just a whole host of different things they can do on campus. They can also volunteer with any nonprofit. That's the typical 501c nonprofit that's been around for 2 years or more. And basically any federal, state, or local government entity. So there's more places they can do it than not. If you have questions about that, you can certainly check out the link. We have a list of eligible schools. You can contact us if you want information about that. And we just, that's finding the place where the students can do this isn't the problem, but it's creating the system where you can plug them in, especially on your campus if you're at a college. That's kind of the critical piece that we're sometimes missing. So we identify the students, but we don't necessarily find them a place to go. And that's part of the puzzle that we're trying to solve. Okay, so how do service organizations register for DSIG? So we want new organizations. There's a form that they fill out. Of course, there is. We're the state. So they would fill out this form and submit it to us. We've had cases where students are already volunteering at a recognized nonprofit, and they've said, "Hey, wait a minute. I'm already volunteering here. Does this work?" Yeah. And then we get that particular organization, that nonprofit, onto our list. And then the student is now getting paid to do the same volunteering or community outreach that they were doing previously. So Um, they can register. We verify that the organization meets the eligibility criteria. And as I mentioned previously, organizations must have been established for a minimum of 2 years before the student begins volunteering. So if it's a brand new organization or a place says, oh, we're going to become a nonprofit so we can take, have these, students come in and volunteer, you have to wait 2 years for that. Volunteer work cannot be for political, social, or religious things or entities. So if it's something like that, they can't do it. Usually that's not an issue, but that's just part of the program. Okay, so student eligibility. How does this work? So the student will, they're going to complete the DREAM Act application, um, and like they normally would, and they're going to complete it by the deadline. They also have to complete a DSIG application as well, right? So that's the first step in the process is always filling out the application. The next step is to, get a Cal Grant B or be Cal Grant B eligible. They need to be enrolled at least half time, and then they have to satisfy unmet need requirements. In other words, there's a formula. When the student fills out the application, that formula is going to crunch those numbers and determine how much unmet need the student has. And in order to get paid under this program, they have to have sufficient unmet need. So, in other words, a student who was at a school and they had several scholarships and a full ride and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they may not have enough unmet need. Typically, that is not the case. More often than not, students do have the unmet need to participate in this program and other programs. So this is the formula that I was talking about. We're gonna have a little pop quiz on this, I think, at the end. So just FYI. I'm kidding. All right. So how does this determine? So every college has what's called the cost of attendance, and that's the dollar amount it costs to go to that particular institution for 1 year, everything included, right? So it's like this is the the fees, the tuition, the housing, food, transportation, books, materials, supplies, insurance, whatever, all those things. And they go, okay, it costs X number of dollars to go to the school. And then what happens is when the student fills out an application, in this case, a DREAM Act application, but it works the same way with the FAFSA, that generates what's called a student aid index or SAI. And that's the number that we use to back out of the cost of attendance to determine the unmet need. So the need that the student has to um, have in order to get some financial aid. So for Cal Grant B, for example, it's very straightforward. It's very simple. They have to have at least $700, excuse me, to qualify for a Cal Grant B. The annual unmet need requirements for DSIG are $4,500 or more to get the max DSIG award. If the unmet need is less than $4,500, then obviously we can't award the maximum and it would be reduced accordingly. So, and then we see the annual amounts there. All right. So we are constantly sort of looking at this. Scholarships need to uh, fall under the category of meeting unmet need. Any kind of payment the student's receiving or financially they're receiving needs to be part of that formula. And it's the same thing with the DSIG program. So we have information on this. If you have questions about this, you can reach out and we will talk you through it. So I did say we had resources, and we have really great resources around DSIG. The specialized programs team has done a great job of putting this together and working with our IT team. And so there's virtually everything that you need to know on this DSIG webpage. So if you go to, you have the link to go there directly. If you go onto the CSAC website, you can navigate there as well. And it breaks it down. It has all the forms. It has the requirements for the students. It has FAQs. It has FAQs also for the colleges or the institution. It has information for the service organizations. I mean, anything that you want, you can find on there. And if you don't, you can contact someone from our team, and they will be happy to discuss with you any of the questions that you have. All right. So this is, we're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail because we are in the process of um, migrating the forms to an electronic format because, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing some things on WebGrants that currently, as things stand right now, has been a very sort of clunky manual process. So that's the good news. So here's the information that you need to know about the applications. You're going to start seeing this in an electronic format with beginning of the 26-27 academic year. And you're going to see this information on the WebGrants portal of the student. So there's a timeline, and if you want more information about that, and I think maybe Amy, when she comes on, will talk more specifically about that because we're transitioning over. Um, the payment is the same exact thing. We're going from a very manual process to a more automated online process, and it says down there, check back in August for more information. So this is a little bit of a work in progress, but very close to being completed. I'm sure Amy will talk about the details. If you want more details about this, you can contact us, but we'll get into that a little bit more. Grow your program. Uh, this guy just told the funniest joke about canned corn. I don't know what it was, but it must have been hilarious. All right, grow your program. This is important, man, especially if you're from a college. Let me just say that if I go to a conference and there are people there from colleges, so CASFA or CISFA or anything where there are sort of college financial aid directors or representatives, and I'm sitting at a big round table with 7 or 8 of them, this is the first thing I do is I grill them on their DSIG program. Oh, you guys got DSIG? How many students? What's your plan? You growing the pro? And they're like, John, can you sit somewhere else? So because like I said, we're really pushing to grow this program. And fortunately, we have some fantastic partners um, at colleges, especially some of the community colleges, who are working very diligently to grow the program. All right. So here's some stats. Here's some stats. This is what's on the back of the baseball card here. So our goal, obviously, is to have the full utilization of the 1,667 awards, right? Currently, right now, we have a little over 1,000 who are accepted, which means we have close to 600 that are not being utilized. So I want to say you look at that and you, wow, that's a lot, but it's fantastic compared to where we started. So we are making steady progress. And this is a fantastic opportunity for students who, can't work necessarily in the US because they're undocumented, but they need money for school. And so this isn't working. It's not a job like a traditional job, but it does allow them to volunteer and to get paid for the volunteering that they're doing. And the other upside, and I'm sure we have a few more slides about this, is that they're not just making money, but they're networking, they're gaining new skills. Um, there's just a whole host of other things that kind of go hand in hand with this. So we kind of see segment by segment um, how many students we have currently participating. And like I said, it's growing, so that's great. So let's continue. All right. How can you grow your program? So number one, promote student volunteer opportunities, right? Um, a lot of times we know that undocumented students say we're not eligible for anything. We know, and that's not the case. A lot of them, in fact, I'd say most students don't realize that this program exists. So DSIG can afford CADA students the opportunity to, to volunteer and to get additional aid money that they probably really need. So we want to make sure that they understand it. I can tell you that the 2 or 3 community colleges, and I know there's more than that, but that I've talked to about this pretty extensively, they have a plan. They know which students are eligible at the very beginning of the academic year. They contact those students. They have a system on campus where they make things available, and they know who's doing what, and they can walk the student through the process. They have someone who oversees the program, on a daily basis. And those are the ones who are doing a great job of growing the program. Remember that students can gain other skills, um, and it looks good on your resume. Like I said, you're networking, you're making new friends, critical thinking. all those things that you don't normally associate with a teenager. I'm kidding. Um, so we want to make sure that they have the opportunity to do this. And like I said, the students who are participating in this really, really like the program, right? It's a win for them and a win for the schools and the organizations. So what are the benefits to the students? So volunteering 15 or 20 hours a week, there's a study that shows it correlates to a higher GPA. Students feel more engaged and connected to the campus, and they tend to stay on the campus longer, right? If they have the opportunity to do something other than just go to class, it's beneficial. And here's a quote about that. Here's another quote. All right. So it's not just coming from me. So we just know there are studies that say that the more engaged a student is on the campus, especially if they have the opportunity to make money to help them pay for school, then the longer they're going to stay, and it just creates a better environment for everyone. So we want to make sure these students have that opportunity. All right. So a lot of you, like I said, we have some campuses that are really developing this, and they have a robust program already on their campus. Um, but not everybody. So we want to talk about some different places and and what they do. The sort of the cream of the crop of these things. Um, um, have done a really good job of this. And this is kind of what they do. So they integrate the student volunteer service. It's a pillar of the college experience. So it's not an extra, it's a side hustle that the financial aid department is trying to, figure out and work on. It's a core part of working with that cohort of students. And they, like I said, they identify those students right away. And it aligns with what they're trying to do, which is to keep kids in college and making enough money that they can do that. Um, they want to pair up students with DSIG participants, and they do regular check-ins, and they try to, when they have the opportunity, obviously they want to pair up the student with a DSIG experience that aligns kind of with what something that the student is interested in, right? That makes it obviously much more interesting for everybody. um, Measure and communicate impact to stakeholders. So they know the schools that are doing a good job, they have better retention rates. They highlight these students. They talk about, they shout out the program. They're very visible on the campuses. And you know that they're doing a good job when they've got 20 or 25 students who are involved and liking the program. And it helps build partnerships with local community organizations. So this is another thing that we've seen is that um, organizations, off campus, right, have some of them have said, "Wow, this is great." And so what happens? It creates a relationship with the campus and that nonprofit, which I think is something that all schools are trying to do is create those relationships in areas off campus. All right. This is just an example, kind of a laundry list of different things that students can do and this is things that they're actually doing. So it just gives you a kind of an idea of some of the things that they do on campus or off campus. Um, so I'm gonna give a little shout out to Cash for College for the workshops and the hard work that our Cal Soap team does by doing a gazillion workshops, many of which the training team participates in. So they can do that. They can yeah, and my daughter actually worked for CalSoap, so I have a really good idea of the work that they put in to go in and help other students complete applications and get the aid they need. So like I said, here's just a list of some other things that students are doing. All right, so let's think outside the box. Man, I haven't heard that for a minute. Okay, hey, get creative, think outside the box. So this is just talking about trying to align what the student's doing with their major goal or interest. Again, I'm not going to go through this whole list, but you can see it makes sense that if you are a theater arts major, then maybe you want to volunteer with in the theater, with costumes, with props, with anything that's, behind the scenes, with the box office, with, I don't know, all the different things. There's a lot that goes with that. So on the CADA, you're going to see that there is a question that asks, are you interested in being considered for the Dream Act and Service Grant? I always tell students to check yes, although I will say mm, a lot of schools are not using this information. So the schools who are doing really well, they just look at every single person who's filed a CADA who has a Cal Grant B. Um, they just look at everyone who's eligible, right? And that's their pool that they're working with. But you do have the opportunity also to pull this information with the web grant Cal ICER. It's on the report, and you could look at this information if they indicated an active interest in the program. Because, if they said, "Yeah, I want to do it," well, great. That makes it easy. Get the student say, "We saw that you wanted to do this. Let's talk about next steps." All right, and this is kind of what it looks like when you see that, ICER file layout. It'll say, "Are you interested in DSIG? Yes or no?" And you can go in and check that information and eventually get the information about that particular student. DSIG has really good promotional materials and a lot of them. So again, go onto the website, check this out. You're going to get all the information you need about the program, but you're also going to get things that you can print up and print out and put up in your, counselor's office, on the college campus, in the financial aid office. High school counselors, you should definitely have these. If you're doing any outreach, you should definitely have these. We want to make sure that students know that this program exists.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Eberhardt. I'm the DSIG program specialist here at the California Student Aid Commission, and I'm super excited to introduce the changes that will be happening to our program starting with the 26-27 academic year. So if we can move on to the next slide. So I wanted to give you guys all a workflow of what the application would look like once we transition into WebGrants. So step one would be the student enters into their WebGrants account. They log in. For those of you who may not be familiar with this program or the system, the WebGrants for Students system, a lot of students are already familiar with it because that's where they maintain their Cal Grant record. So they should already have some familiarity with this website. They would log in and they would scroll to where the DSIG dashboard is. And I believe we'll have a few slides in a little bit to show you guys a visual. And then if they are eligible, then they'll see that they have the option to submit an application. And then I'm going to turn off my camera because it is quite distracting. And so when the student completes their application, they will be asked to provide their field of study and their service organization. And then they have to complete a student agreement section where they just read over the agreement that they are completing by submitting the application. And then at that point, the application will move into this pending service org validation status. And that would mean that at that point, me and the DSIG team will verify that the student is truly participating with the service organization they listed on their DSIG application. Thank you. Once we verify participation at that service organization, then the application will move into pending financial aid administrator review. This is when the institution would be able to log on to their WebGrants account and pull up the DSIG roster and provide the student's annual unmet need on the DSIG roster. Once that is completed, WebGrants will determine award and payment amounts based off of the annual unmet need the institution provides on the DSIG roster. And then the final step would be the student moves into accepted status, and we would send the student the welcome email that we currently send. A lot of the students that participate in DSIG have already probably seen this welcome email, including those financial aid administrators. And essentially, once the student is in this accepted status, that's when we'll send out the welcome emails. Thank you. So this is what the application will look like. So the student would go into their WebGrants for Students account. They would log in. They would scroll down to the bottom, and then that's when they'll see the what I'm calling the DSIG dashboard. And then they're going to want to select the academic year that they want to apply for. So that'll be the 26-27 academic year. What's nice now that we're integrated into WebGrants is that the campuses no longer will need to make that Cal Grant B determination. The system will do a preliminary check of the students meeting that that Cal Grant B piece. And if the student doesn't meet the Cal Grant B eligibility, if the student is a FAFSA student, then they would not have the option to complete the DSIG application. It would say ineligible, and it would not allow the student to submit an application. This includes students who had their Cal Grant award withdrawn. They would see ineligible status. If the student has used up all their DSIG eligibility, because they can receive it for up to 4 essentially full-time years, then those students would also not be able to apply. But if they are eligible, then they would see this orange tile that says application not submitted. They would hit that apply button, and then they'd be able to complete the DSIG application, which is listed right here on the right-hand side. So you'll see that at the top of the application, that's where the student information is going to be listed. This is pre-populated. It's pulled from the California DREAM Act application. If the name on here is incorrect, we ask that the student follow the Cal Grant process to update their name, because essentially they need to update their name that they provided on the California DREAM Act application. The school of attendance is also based off of where they're awarded Cal Grant. So if the school of attendance needs to be changed, it has to be processed through the Cal Grant school change process that is currently set up. So that information is going to be pre-populated. They cannot change that on the DSIG application. After that section, they'll see the DSIG application officially. And so basically, this is where the student would select a major that closely aligns with their major. We kind of had to condense the list, right? We can't have all the majors listed on there. So our recommendation here is for students to select a major that closely aligns, or a field of study that closely aligns with their major. Move on to the next slide. Thank you so much. So the student's going to select their field of study. Then they're going to scroll down, and there's going to be a section for the students to select their service organization, which is highlighted by this red box right here. So we worked with IT to already import all these service organizations that have previously participated. So the student would be able to search for an existing pre-approved service organization either by name. They can search by the pre-approved service organizations by the city, or the name of the certifying official who's at that organization. If it's a completely new service organization that has never participated with DSIG, then we ask that the student provide the organization name, the certifying official name, and along with the email address, because that's when we here at the Student Aid Commission, specifically the DSIG team, will reach out to that organization and ask for the information that we need in order to validate that they meet the requirements as a DSIG service org. After that, the student would see this DSIG student agreement. They would carefully read that, hit the submit button, and then on the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see that their application, once they've submitted the application, they would move into a pending service organization validation. They would also see their award status tile at that time. This screenshot doesn't show it, but it would show a $0 amount, because we still need that annual unmet need from the financial aid administrator to make that award determination. Move on to the next slide. Thank you so much. Okay, so student submits their application. Now the financial aid administrator is going to have to do their part, right? So the financial aid administrator would log into WebGrants, into the institutional WebGrants. They'd go onto the roster, and then the DSIG roster, and then they'd be able to, the academic year will already be populated based off of the current academic year. The school ID will already be determined based off of the access that this financial aid administrator has. Now, what this administrator will have to do here is, I think if you click one more time, under the status section, they're going to select the pending FAA review status. Those are basically the list of students that they would have to be working essentially on their DSIG roster. When they hit search, they're going to see a list of all the students at their campus that are in this pending FAA review. And then and then it'll bring them to the roster. This is kind of like a condensed version of what the roster would look like, but the roster itself would have the student's information as far as like, their name, their date of birth, their CSEC ID. It will also show their application status, and at the very bottom is where the administrator, the financial aid administrator, will see this admin section. And essentially, this is the part where this administrator is going to report the annual unmet need. So we do provide a definition on the roster for those of you who are wondering how this is determined. It's the cost of attendance minus the student aid index. That's what the annual unmet need is that needs to be reported on here. So the neat thing that we're able to do now that we're in WebGrants is that based off of what the annual unmet need is reported here, the DSIG annual award amount, that field right below, will already be determined based off of what's reported on there. And then the term payments will also be determined on this screen. I do want to make a note here that these screenshots are basically my mock-up version of what I provided to IT. Visually, this can change once we go live. I believe the roster should go live either at the middle of July or towards the end of July. But for the purposes of this training, I wanted to give you guys kind of an idea of what the roster would look like. Can move on to the next slide. Thank you so much. I believe, so then at this point, right, so the system would take that annual unmet need, it would run through a weekly job, and then it would determine the student's DSIG annual award amount. And then once the student has an annual award amount, their application status will change to accepted. At that point, that's when we recommend that the student would be able to start their hours, their volunteer hours. They would receive a welcome email, and they would still need to track their hours using either the service hours tracker that we have specifically for DSIG. If they're a College Core participating student, then they can track it on their America Learns timesheet, or they can track it on any other documentation that the service org uses to collect hours. As long as the service org, the documentation of hours is submitted by the certifying official, we'll accept it, or signed by the certifying official if the student is submitting it on their own. Move on to this next slide. So after the student completes each block of either 150 semester hours or 100 quarter hours, then the student would be eligible to submit their hours to us to initiate the payment process for the DSIG payment. Hours must be completed before the end of the academic year. So that means that for the 26-27 year, students will have until from July 1st through June 30th to complete their hours. So this is the service hour tracker that I was mentioning. This one's the one if, for instance, if your organization doesn't want to use your own internal system to track the DSIG student hours, then you can use this DSIG specific one. Again, if you're a College Core, if it's a DSIG student participating in the College Core program, they have their own way of tracking hours. We'll accept that, but we just wanted to show you what that would look like. If you are volunteering, if a student is volunteering at more than one organization, we do ask that those hours be tracked separately on separate service hours trackers, just because it makes it easier for us to enter those hours into the system. Okay, step 2. So I kind of already talked about this one a little bit. So if we can hit the next slide. So this is going to be the payment workflow now in WebGrants. So the payment status for each one of those payments is going to be in a not submitted status. If we can go ahead and then the hours will be submitted to us via email. That component of this workflow has not changed. That's going to remain the same as it currently stands. So the hours will be submitted to us either by the certifying official or by the student. If the student is submitting, we are going to ask that they either CC the certifying official or that the certifying official signs the documentation. And click thank you. Then the nice thing now that we're in WebGrants is that we will have the capability to enter, we meaning the DSIG team, will have the capability to enter the hours into WebGrants and the payment status for those payments. So the way that we've asked IT to program it is, hey, if the student's attending a semester school, once we report 150 hours in the system, then that's when the financial aid administrator would be able to request the payment. And the way that they'd be able to figure out which students they need to request payment for are the students who are in this ready for payment status. If we can move on to, thank you. Once the student is, so similar to the DSIG during the DSIG workflow, the administrators are going to log onto the roster. They're going to filter their students down to the ones that are in this ready for payment status and report the term level unmet need. The payment will then move into payment requested. And then if we can move on to the next one. And then the Student Aid Commission DSIG team will request checks from the checks from the state controller's office, and then the checks are mailed to the campus. So how the student submits hours and how the payments are sent to the student will not change. The piece that will change is that there's no longer a payment request form. The financial aid administrator can report term level unmet need in the DSIG roster, and the payment itself won't become active for a financial aid administrator to report hours until the student meets the minimum hour requirement. So those are kind of the key changes with this payment workflow in WebGrants. If we can move, thank you. So this is what the roster would look like for the payment processing side, right? The financial aid administrator would log into their WebGrants for students. I'm sorry, WebGrants account, not the WebGrants for students. They would look for the DSIG menu, select roster, select the status of ready for payment. They'll see all the students that are in the ready for payment status. They'd click the I icon. And if we can, thank you. And then here's more of the detail of what the roster would look like, right? So the financial aid administrator would see the student demographic details, again, pulled from the California DREAM Act application. Application details, so it's going to say the year, the institution, the field of study, payment history. So this will list the lifetime DSIG payments for the student and along with the remaining eligibility for the student. And then that's when the financial aid administrator will see the admin section. They'll see, again, the application status, the award amounts. The annual award amount would already be reported. You wouldn't be able to change the annual award amount at this point. The only way that you would be able to change the annual award amount is at the term level. So for instance, if there is a change and you need to update the annual unmet need, then you would do that in this, right there. You would report the term unmet need, and then the annual unmet need will be updated based off of what you report at the term unmet need level. The amount for that payment will also be populated based off of the term unmet need level. And then you would have to check that payment one box. It would change the payment to payment requested. And that's the way that we would know which students are ready to request checks for. Okay, payment breakdown. I believe I think that was it for my piece, but I did want to add a few more notes. Sorry, Tracy.
No worries.
So we did test the DSIG application out in the live environment on, I think, about a week ago, and we've continued working with some campuses to have students complete the application. And I am so happy that we've gotten super positive feedback from the students. I think one of the students that we worked with completed their application in a matter of like 1 to 2 minutes. They are really looking forward to finally being able to do their application online. And I just want to give a shout out to the DSIG team. I won't name them by name because I know they like to stay a little anonymous, for the help from the campuses who've worked with us to get this online, and also for our IT team, because sometimes I'm like, oh, here's a last minute request. Can we do this? And they always say yes to me. So thank you for everyone, and including the training team who's allowing us to kind of come in here and go over these changes. But thank you to everyone that has helped us through this process. I'm really looking forward to the new academic year.
Thank you, Amy. And, for all of you in the webinar, consider yourselves very privileged to hear from Amy, who has been our fearless lead of the DSIG program. And I want to give her a major shout out for all the work that she's done over the past several months, working with IT and designing this brand new DSIG platform within WebGrants. It takes a lot of time and effort and brain power. So, congrats, Amy, on a great project, and we appreciate you so much. I'm lucky enough to have worked with Amy not only here at CSAC, but also on the other side when I used to work at a CSU and I oversaw the DSIG program there. So she was a huge help to me and made sure that, she helped me pay my students for their volunteer hours. So thank you for all of the reactions that you're posting in the Zoom right now. They are definitely much deserved to Amy and the whole DSIG team. And so we have about 15 minutes left in the webinar, so I'm going to go through just the last section very briefly. Now, the DSIG program itself is going through that major change with the WebGrants upgrade, but some things haven't changed, as Amy described, is that there are some steps in the process that will remain the same. And what I'm going to walk through in the last few minutes is how you'll be reconciling your 25-26 funds, because as you know, the modernization of DSIG will not be live until next year in 26-27. And with that, again, my name's Tracy Hale. I just wanted to come on and allow you to put a face with the name, but I'll shut my camera off and we'll get through the last section of today's webinar. So again, thanks for sticking with us. So the breakdown of payments for DSIG students is going to depend on what type of school they attend, whether it's a semester school or a quarter school. No matter what school they attend, the requirement for the $4,500 payout is 300 hours of community service or volunteer time. So those 300 hours must be completed between July 1st of 2025 and June 30th of 2026, which is quickly approaching in the next few weeks. And so they should be tracking those hours on their service hours tracker and should be submitting those trackers before year-end reconciliation, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So semester school students should be submitting 2 payments annually for every 150-hour block that they complete. And students attending a quarter school should be submitting 3 payment requests, 1 for every 100-hour block that they complete. Students at a semester school, their payments will be divided in half into 2 payments of $2,250, whereas quarter school students will have 3 payments of $1,500 each. Keep in mind, however, that students do receive reduced payments under these amounts if either their unmet need is less than $4,500 and they're approaching that maximum cost of attendance, or if they do not fulfill all 300 volunteer service hours. Let's talk about that more on the next slide. Now, a question that we get often is, what if my student does not complete all 300 hours? Can they still get paid for their volunteer work? Yes, so students can receive a payment for every block of hours that they complete. Again, semester schools blocks are a minimum of 150 hours, and quarter school students must complete their volunteer hours in blocks of at least 100 hours each to receive that payment. If we have a student, say, for example, they completed just 250 hours for the year, we do not prorate payments based on partial blocks of hours. Instead, a student in this example, if they were attending a semester school, they would be eligible for 1 payment only for that 150-hour block. They cannot receive payment for that extra 100 hours of service because, again, to receive a payment, they must complete hours in those blocks. A quarter school student who, say, completed 250 hours would be eligible for 2 payments for 2 blocks of 200 hours or 100 hours each per block. And so the student would not be paid for those other 50 hours of service. So it's important to let students know that it's important they keep on track to complete all of their hours. It would be very unfortunate to not be able to pay students for a certain amount of hours that did not achieve that block. So students should plan accordingly to ensure that they maximize their payment amount. Requesting payments, again, that's going to look a lot different next year, but for this current year, as we approach the end of 25-26, students should be emailing their documentation of hours to dsig@csac.ca.gov. Payments do take 4 to 6 weeks to be mailed. Those checks do come from the state controller's office, so it does involve some processing time there. But students and the financial aid administrator that signed the payment request form will be notified by email once the payments are approved and mailed. So make sure you're checking your email and remind your students to check their email as well. DSIG payments are made after the students receive a Cal Grant payment. So if you are the DSIG coordinator at your school, but you are not the Cal Grant coordinator, make sure you partner up. The Cal Grant coordinator should be your bestie, because in order for the student to receive their DSIG payment, there has to be a Cal Grant payment posted in WebGrants before the DSIG payment can be processed. So again, if there's a separate Cal Grant coordinator, make sure that you're working together to ensure that everything is done in a timely manner. DSIG payments come in the form of a paper check, and they are mailed to the institution's financial aid office. The checks are made payable to the student in the care of the college, so you do have 2 options there. The student can either pick up the paper check and cash it themselves, or, as we'll talk about in a moment, the check can be cashed into the school account, and then that amount can be dispersed to the student, which I found to be a lot easier because it was very hard to track down students and get them to come in and pick up the check while the bursar's office was open. Some students are volunteering off campus and may not be on campus during those office hours. So I did find that dispersing the funds was easier, but there's some things to keep in mind, which we'll talk about in a moment. And so during the payment process, the CSAC responsibility is to confirm that the Cal Grant was reported before the DSIG payment is processed. We also certify that the student completed the required number of volunteer service hours at their qualifying organization. We also issue the checks in the student's name in care of the college and send out the email notification to both the student and the financial aid administrator. Now, your responsibility as a financial aid office is to work your rosters as normal, make sure that you're reporting student enrollment and paying those Cal Grants accordingly every term to ensure that their DSIG payment is not delayed, and also to help notify students once checks are available for pickup if you are choosing that method, or you are ensuring that the checks are dispersed into the student's account at the institution. It's very important that you follow your campus's Cal Grant access policy, and we're going to talk about that on the next slide. This is very important when it comes to dispersing DSIG. So DSIG payments are a lot like Cal Grant access in the sense that they have to follow the Cal Grant access award policy. So schools that participate in the Cal Grant program have an institutional participation agreement, or the IPA, which states that the school has to set up an access fund policy. That means access funds from Cal Grant, as well as DSIG payments, should be going directly to the student. They should not be applying to any balance that the student has with the college or university. The student earned their DSIG funds through their volunteer service and therefore should be receiving the full amount directly to them to go in their pocket. The only time you can disperse and apply it toward a balance is if you have provided the student has provided written consent that allows the campus to apply those funds toward an unpaid school balance. This is the same policy with access. So it's easy to follow your own established access policy, which has been around for many, many years, and just make sure that those funds are going directly to the student unless they've said otherwise. Reconciling DSIG funds, it's a very manual process, but really just involves keeping records. The records you should be keeping include the payment confirmation email that was sent by the CSAC DSIG team. They send emails when those payments are ready to be mailed and that you should be expecting those within a few days. Also, keeping scanned copies of checks. You are able to make photocopies of those checks. Obviously, they can't be cashed in that way, but it's important that you retain a copy for the student's file and that you keep that confidential and follow all FERPA policy requirements. But that will allow you to cross-reference your ledger with the copies of the checks and the copies of the emails in order to ensure that all students who received a check have been dispersed, have been paid, and that you've accounted for any returned or reissued checks. When you're reconciling DSIG funds, if you have any discrepancies, you can work with us to help resolve those. If there's something you're not sure about, you can email the DSIG team there. Now, I've seen a lot of questions in the Q&A about live scans, so thank you to the DSIG team for addressing those questions. We just wanted to dispel some myths about background checks being required for DSIG. Both the DSIG and the College Core programs do not require background checks. Just to reiterate that, some campuses or service organizations may require a California Department of Justice background check, which is completely different than a federal background check. We'll have a link at the bottom of the slide in just a moment with some FAQs about what the California Department of Justice background check is, but no federal background checks are required. Also, another myth is that SSN is required for a background check. That is not true. Typically, criminal background checks use fingerprints, name, date of birth, and other personal info, but not an SSN. They may ask for an employment authorization document, but again, it's not necessarily required. So that's good news for our students to protect their privacy and maintain that confidentiality. Also, another myth is that students have to pay for their own background checks. That's not necessarily the case. Some colleges and universities have undocumented student centers that can help cover the cost of those background checks. We have a link here to link to your school's undocumented student center for more information. Also, the California Undocumented Higher Ed Coalition has a great FAQ. We recommend clicking that link here that talks more about those California-specific background checks. And then finally, in addition to DSIG, there are other opportunities for students to earn money for volunteer work, or we'll also talk about scholarships. But if you weren't aware, the Californians for All College Core program is also a volunteer program that allows students to earn up to $10,000 per year with 450 hours of volunteer service. That means that DSIG recipients can participate in College Core, and they can, as long as they've served an additional 150 hours, in addition to the 300 they did for DSIG, they can receive the full 10,000. The way it works is that College Core will pay $5,500 and DSIG will pay $4,500 for a total of $10,000 for the year. At the CSU I worked at, we had a College Core program on campus, so I worked very closely with the Career Center and the College Core lead in order to get our students paid $10,000 for their 450 hours of work. This program is available at 53 participating community colleges, CSUs, UCs, and even some private colleges. There's a list here, many of the UCs and CSUs. We've got some community colleges here. College of the Desert, Compton College, Hartnell College is new, Bakersfield College is new. So congrats to those new schools for getting on board with this amazing program. College Core is not just for undocumented CADA filers. FAFSA filers can also participate, but it's great that our DSIG students can get that additional $5,500 for doing the same amount of volunteer work. They don't have to do 450 in addition to their 300 for DSIG. It would be 450 hours total. And just a few best practices: be mindful of those unmet need requirements. Regularly review your students to make sure that they don't exceed that unmet need requirement so that they aren't volunteering and unable to get those funds. Also, make sure that you're promoting DSIG. As John talked about, it's important to grow your program. We still have underutilized awards. We have over 1,000 this year, which is amazing, but still we have up to 1,667 per year. Make sure that students complete all 300 of their hours to receive the maximum award, and encourage students to join California College Corps if it's available at your school to increase that award to $10,000. That's amazing. And here's some resources for you. Since we are at the end of our webinar, I won't go into too much detail here. We also sent out some helpful resources for you. It was included in the PDF that was sent to you if you had pre-registered for the webinar. And of course, if you did not receive a copy of today's PDF, please feel free to reach out to the training team specifically for that PDF. And if you have questions or need anything with regards to DSIG, this is their direct email as well. It's an amazing team of people. We love working with them. Your students and parents can contact school support if they need our help. And then, switch that. You, as financially administrators, high school counselors, any kind of educational staff, you can contact school support. And then student support is for your students and for your parents if they need CSAC assistance. And with that, we want to thank you again. So sorry we went 2 minutes over, but we appreciate you all being here and for all the hard work you do with your students and promoting this program. With that, I will go ahead and allow for any further final questions in the Q&A box. Go ahead and type those in and we'll get those answers to you. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great rest of your day and we will see you next time. Have a great weekend.